The joke started with laughter and ended with silence so heavy it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Every year, our family gathered at my parents' house for Thanksgiving. The tradition had been going on longer than I could remember. Same house, same decorations, same chaotic energy that always filled the place the moment relatives started arriving. The dining room table barely fit everyone. My mom insisted on using the big oak table that had belonged to my grandfather, even though it meant squeezing in extra folding chairs and balancing dishes on every available surface. The smell of roasted turkey drifted through the house, mixed with cinnamon, butter, and the faint scent of wood from the fireplace. Football murmured from the living room television while my cousins argued over who got the last dinner roll. It was loud, messy, familiar, and completely normal. At least, it was supposed to be. My father stood at the head of the table, carving the turkey like he was performing surgery. He always treated Thanksgiving dinner like it was his personal show. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly, holding the carving knife like a microphone, "prepare yourselves for the most perfectly cooked turkey in North America." My aunt rolled her eyes. "You say that every year, John." "And every year I'm right," he replied proudly. Laughter rippled around the table. That was my dad. Big personality, big voice, big laugh. He loved being the center of attention, and the rest of us had gotten used to it. I sat halfway down the table between my younger sister Emma and my cousin Tyler. Emma was scrolling through her phone under the table, while Tyler quietly loaded his plate with an amount of food that would have fed a small village. "Dude," he whispered to me, "your dad cooked like 3 turkeys this year." "He thinks more food means better hosting," I whispered back. Across the table, Uncle Mark lifted his glass. "Speech," he called out. Several people cheered. My dad never missed a chance for that. He wiped his hands dramatically on a towel and stood straight, raising his glass. "Before we eat," he said, "I'd like to say how grateful I am that we're all here together." Everyone quieted down a little. "Family," he continued, "is the most important thing in the world." My mom smiled softly from her seat beside him. She always loved when he said things like that. "And speaking of family," Dad added with a mischievous grin, "I've got a little surprise." The moment he said that, several people groaned. "Oh no," Emma muttered. "What now?" my aunt sighed. Dad bent down and reached under the table. When he came back up, he was holding a small white box. It was simple, minimal, and oddly familiar. I squinted at it. Then the logo clicked in my brain. A DNA test kit. The room erupted in laughter. Uncle Mark nearly choked on his drink. "What is that?" Tyler laughed. Dad pointed directly at me. "This," he said proudly, "is for Alex." Every eye at the table turned toward me. "Why me?" I asked cautiously. Dad leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Well," he said, grinning, "because you're the only one in this family who doesn't look like the rest of us." More laughter exploded around the table. It wasn't the first time that joke had been made, not even close. Growing up, I had heard it hundreds of times. My dad was tall, broad-shouldered, and had thick dark hair. My sister Emma looked exactly like him. Same hair, same jawline, same confident smile. But me? I was different. Lighter hair, different eyes, different face structure. Even strangers noticed it. When I was a kid, people sometimes asked my mom if I was adopted. At family gatherings, the jokes always came out. Maybe the hospital switched babies. Maybe Alex belongs to the neighbors. Maybe the mailman is his real dad. And my dad always laughed the loudest. At first, when I was younger, it bothered me, but over time it had become just another running family joke. Dad slid the box across the table toward me. "Go on, let's finally solve the mystery." Emma snorted. "Oh my God." Tyler leaned over. "You better hope you're not secretly British or something." Laughter spread again. But my mom didn't laugh. I noticed it immediately. She was sitting very still, her fork untouched in her hand. Her smile looked forced. "John," she said quietly. Dad looked at her. "Yeah? Maybe that's not necessary." Her voice was soft, but there was something strange about it. Dad waved dismissively. "Oh, come on, Linda, it's just a joke." "It's not really funny," she replied. The table got a little quieter. Dad shrugged. "Well, it'll be funny when we find out Alex is secretly Scandinavian." More chuckles. He nudged the box closer to me. "Open it." I hesitated. Part of me thought the whole thing was ridiculous. Another part of me thought, why not? "All right," I said finally, "but if this proves I'm adopted, you're buying me a car." The room burst out laughing again. Dad slapped the table. "Deal." Emma rolled her eyes. "This family is insane." I opened the box. Inside was a simple cheek swab and a small plastic tube. The instructions were printed neatly on top. "Step 1, I read, swab inside of cheek." "Do it!" Tyler cheered. My cousin filmed it on his phone like it was a sporting event. "Ladies and gentlemen, the moment of truth." Even my dad looked excited, so I shrugged and swabbed my cheek. The whole table applauded like I'd just won a contest. "Send it tomorrow," Dad said proudly. Mom finally forced a small smile, but she barely touched her food for the rest of dinner. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Looking back now, that was the first sign something was wrong. 3 weeks passed. Life went back to normal. I almost forgot about the test entirely. The kit had been mailed the day after Thanksgiving, but I figured results would take a while. Work kept me busy, friends distracted me. The whole thing faded into the background like a half-forgotten joke. Until one Tuesday night. I was sitting on my couch with my laptop open, half watching some random show and scrolling through emails. Most of them were junk. Promotions, work messages, spam. Then one subject line caught my eye. "Your DNA results are ready." For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I laughed to myself. "Oh yeah," I muttered. I clicked the email. A link appeared. "View your results." My curiosity kicked in. Why not? I clicked it. The website loaded slowly. A spinning circle appeared. Then a colorful chart popped onto the screen showing ancestry estimates. Europe, some Northern European percentages, nothing surprising. I scrolled down. Another section appeared. DNA relatives. That's when I saw it. Parent match probability. Mother, 99.9%. I nodded. That made sense. Then I looked at the next line. Father, 0%. I frowned. That couldn't be right. Maybe I was reading it wrong. I leaned closer to the screen. The number didn't change. 0%. My heart started beating a little faster. I refreshed the page. Same result. I scrolled further down. There was a message underneath. Potential close relative match found. I clicked it. A name appeared. The moment I saw it, my stomach dropped. Because it wasn't some stranger. It wasn't some unknown person in another state. It was someone I had known my entire life. Someone who had been sitting at that Thanksgiving table. Mark Reynolds. My uncle. My father's younger brother. The screen explained that we shared enough DNA to indicate a close paternal relationship. My brain struggled to process it. Uncle Mark? That didn't make sense. At all. I leaned back in my chair. A strange chill spread through my chest. Suddenly, my mind replayed Thanksgiving. My dad laughing, everyone joking, my mom's face, the way she had gone quiet, the way she had said, "Maybe that's not necessary." My hands started shaking. Something felt wrong, very wrong. I grabbed my keys because there was only one place I could go, my parents' house. And somehow, deep down, I already knew that whatever waited there was going to change everything.
Mom started crying before anyone spoke. This was different. Her shoulders trembled. Her breathing broke into uneven pieces. The kind of crying that comes from something buried for far too long finally forcing its way out. My father stood in the middle of the living room doorway, my phone still in his hand. The screen was glowing in the dim light. He stared at it like the numbers might rearrange themselves if he waited long enough. "Linda," he said slowly. His voice sounded strange, tight, controlled. "Tell me this thing is wrong." Mom lowered her hands from her face, but the tears didn't stop. I can't." The silence that followed felt suffocating. My father blinked once. Then again. He let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Okay," he said, nodding to himself like he was trying to stay calm. "All right, let's try that again." He turned the phone toward her. "This test says I'm not Alex's father." His voice grew louder with each word. "So either this company made the worst mistake in scientific history," he stopped. His eyes locked onto hers, "or you have something to explain." Mom didn't answer. That silence did more damage than any words could have. My father's jaw clenched. "You knew," he said quietly. Mom shook her head weakly. "I didn't know for sure." That answer seemed to break something inside him. "For sure?" he repeated. His voice rose. "Linda, we've been married 27 years. I stepped forward. "Mom," I said carefully, "is it true?" She looked at me then. The pain in her eyes was almost unbearable. "Yes," the word landed like a stone in the middle of the room. My father slowly sat down on the couch, as if his legs had suddenly stopped working. He rubbed his face with both hands. "My own brother?" he muttered. Mom shook her head immediately. "No, it wasn't like that." Dad looked up sharply. "Then what was it like?" Mom took a deep breath. Dad frowned. "What?" She wiped her tears and tried to steady her voice. "Mark was there that weekend." Mom continued. "But, John, I met Mark first." The room went completely still. My father blinked. "What do you mean you met him first?" Mom looked down at her hands. "We met at a concert." "Only for a short time," she said quickly. 2 weeks. Dad shook his head in disbelief. "And then he introduced you to me?" She nodded slowly. "Yes." I could practically hear my father's thoughts racing. "So, wait," he said. "You were seeing Mark for a couple weeks. Then you started seeing me." "Yes." I found out I was pregnant. No one moved. No one breathed. The words hung in the air like a thundercloud. Dad leaned back against the couch. "You didn't know whose it was." Mom closed her eyes. "No." I felt like the floor had shifted beneath my feet. "So you just guessed?" I asked quietly. Her eyes snapped open. "I didn't guess." My father looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Mom wiped her tears. "I believed it was yours." Dad laughed bitterly. "You believed?" "I never cheated on you," she said quickly. "Once you and I started dating, Mark and I were completely over." Dad shook his head slowly. "But you never told me there was even a possibility." "I was terrified," she whispered. "Of what?" he asked. "Of losing you." Dad looked away. "That's funny," he muttered. "Because right now I feel like I lost 27 years. The words cut through the room like glass. Mom covered her mouth. "I never wanted to hurt you." Dad ran his hand through his hair. "So, you just..." I suddenly remembered something. "Does Uncle Mark know?" He stared at her in disbelief. "Linda, this means he has a son and doesn't even know it." Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "I couldn't destroy both of your lives." Dad stood up abruptly and started pacing across the room. His hands were shaking now. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "Absolutely unbelievable." He stopped suddenly and looked at me. For a moment, I braced myself. I didn't know what he was about to say, or what he might do, but instead of anger, I saw pain. Deep, raw pain. Alex, he said quietly. I swallowed hard. Yeah? He walked over slowly. I know what that test says. I nodded. But listen to me. His voice cracked. I was there the day you were born. Memories flashed through my mind instantly. Hospital photos. Birthday parties, family vacations. I taught you how to ride a bike, he continued. You fell 3 times and refused to quit. A tear rolled down my cheek. He smiled faintly. You remember that science fair volcano? I laughed weakly. The one that exploded all over the gym floor? He nodded. Your teacher nearly had a heart attack? I wiped my face. Yeah, I remember. Dad placed his hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm. You're my son? My throat burned. That test doesn't erase 26 years. Before I realized it, he pulled me into a hug, and I hugged him back just as tightly. For a moment, the 3 of us just stood there, broken, confused, trying to understand what our family had just become. Eventually, Dad let go and sighed heavily. Well, he said quietly, this explains the hair. Despite everything, a small laugh escaped me. Dad rubbed his forehead. Yeah, we'll get to the apologies later. Then something seemed to click in his mind. He turned toward me again. Wait a second. What? I asked. He pointed at my phone. The test says Mark is a close paternal match. Yeah, that means... He paused. You're his son. I nodded slowly. Most likely. Dad exhaled deeply, which means my brother has a son he doesn't know about. Dad stared at her. You think I'm just going to keep this secret too? I'm begging you. He shook his head. This isn't just your secret anymore. She started crying again. Mark will hate me. He might after this. He sighed. Well, I guess we're going to find out. Then he looked at me. Alex. Yeah? How do you feel about all this? I thought about it for a long moment. Everything felt unreal. Dad waited. I feel like my life just got rewritten. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. Mom whispered something then. So, what happens now? Dad looked around the room. The house suddenly felt different, like the walls were holding a brand new story. Well, he said finally, I guess Thanksgiving is going to be really awkward this year. I laughed weakly. That's one way to put it. But none of us realized something yet. Something the DNA test hadn't finished revealing. Because 2 days later, the company updated my results. And the new information would uncover a secret even bigger than the one we had just survived. A secret that would prove our family history was far more complicated than any of us ever imagined.